I don't hear anything.
We're always on the brink, Joe.
It is?
On the brink of something. Of what?
I don't know.
A change is coming.
Yeah.
On the brink of utopia, maybe.
Yeah.
They hope. The wokest believe. This is all leading to good stuff. The thing about, I was saying to you, we were looking at the news earlier.
Yeah. We were? Don't remember that.
It's like the entire homepage of any mainstream, it's just like terrorism, crime, COVID, lockdown, terror, be afraid. It's depressing.
Mm-hmm. On the brink of something. Yeah, it's not. It seems like it's not sustainable, at this point, and that's why so many people are clamoring for things to go back to normal,
Yeah.
When's it going back to normal? When's this all going to be over?
Come on, we took the shots down.
Yeah.
Let's just go back to it. No.
That's the sentiment you get from most people is, when is this gonna just be done? When can we just forget about it and go back to normal? And of course, it's interesting that they said fairly on in this so-called pandemic that there'll be no return to the old normal. There will only be a new normal, right?
They
it's
said,
almost
it,
like
said it right up front.
They preempted that feeling amongst the population, of like, is this going to end? Can't we just get over this? Can't we just get on with this and get it done? And no. This is a break point. There's a new normal coming and blah blah. And it's all very weird. You can understand how all that kind of stuff, when people look at that, anybody with a bit of sense looks at it. Most people aren't looking at that. That's the thing. Most people, you have to remember that most people aren't actually looking. Most members of the population aren't actually looking in any detail at anything that's going on. They're just kind of like trying to get on with their lives, catching the odd bit of news, wondering what's going on, and
They are feeling it though.
They're feeling it, but they have no way to put words on it or put an explanation on it. And the people who do try to put, who are paying more attention, look into it, try and put an explanation on it, you can see how they get they go down conspiracy rabbit holes, right? And they start coming up with all sorts of explanations about global plots by the elite to do A, B, and C.
Understandably.
Absolutely understandably.
It's put on a platter for
yeah,
them.
because there is no other narrative to explain that. I memean, when you put that to someone who would try and counter that argument, the conspiracy argument, what would they say? That if you pile up the evidence, basically, that, for example, that governments clearly kind of early on, before this was sudden, supposedly this pandemic came out of nowhere, right? It was everybody was blindsided, including governments. We don't know what's going on. It's completely new. We'll just see where it goes. But very quickly, and we're talking about really almost a year ago now, so only a few months or like 6 months into the quote-unquote pandemic, all very new. Nobody knew what was going on. Government's already talking about, government and government spokespeople and media talking heads are speaking about no return to old way of life.
Yeah.
There's going to be a new way of life. Of course, you had Klaus Anal Schwab, and the Great Reset, and the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
The Fourth Industrial...
Yeah, all that stuff. So, I mean, it's hard not to conclude that there is some kind of a plan, or they're capitalizing on
The
it.
Fourth Reich. No, sorry.
There's a Fourth Reich. Yeah.
Well, you know what they say? It's the number one counter to conspiracy theory. It's the number one explanation for it on any kind of BBC type mainstream fact sheet. Conspiracy theories. It's a well, this is part of their psychoanalysis of it. You see, it's what happens when people try to put a rational explanation on things that they find confusing. That's not untrue. That is the case. What they don't say is that it's the BBC et al. Who are confusing the shit out of people with completely absurd instructions, contradictory stories, left, right, and center, on everything.
Mm-hmm.
And
forcing them.
They lampoon Trump and his cabinet for, embracing the post-fact, post-truth world and stuff like that. Hold on a second. They were a lot more truthful, objectively, than the stuff that comes out of the two-party consensus in most countries.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, you've got confused people.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they come across, well, you name it, the Rockefeller lockstep document, Pandemic 201 exercise, tabletop exercise by the Bill Gates Foundation last October or 2 years ago, et cetera, et cetera. And they go, I'm connecting some dots here, and this makes sense. And it does make more sense than what's offered to them by the mainstream.
Yeah. If you
So,
think,
yes, they're confused. They're confused by governments.
yeah,
And so they come up with a conspiracy theory, a new story that
Yeah.
makes more sense.
that does actually make more sense. Because the narrative they're being given by governments and by the media does not make any sense.
No.
Obviously, I mean, and that's not an opinion. That's clearly you can show complete. Well, it doesn't make any sense, but it's not necessarily, let's say, in and of itself, the statements they make that are confusing, but rather it's the lack of consistency in their messaging and the contradictory nature of their messaging
100%.
that confuses people. So they'll say one thing one day, another thing the next day. It seems like nobody knows what's
Lab
going on.
leak theory was verboten speech.
You're not allowed to talk about lab
Then
leak
it
theory.
was actually, it's...
Which came out this week that Fauci didn't admit, because Fauci doesn't admit
No.
anything.
Do you want to put that up? I have it.
Yeah, Fauci.
After all this nonsense, back and forth, you weren't allowed to suggest it, and now, headline last week, let me just pass to Scotty so I can put it up. The NIH, someone at the NIH admitted on the record to a little bit, there was a little bit of US government agency, NIH funding. Headline is NIH admits to funding gain-of-function research in Wuhan. Says EcoHealth Alliance violated reporting
Right, so
requirements.
they're blaming each other at this point.
Yeah,
right? But
it
the
was
bottom
just a
line is-
little bureaucratic slip-up, a little bit of funding, went.
Except Fauci
all that-
repeatedly in front of Congress says, no, I
No.
did not accuse, what do you call him, Rand Paul.
Rand Paul and called
says-
him a liar.
Says him he doesn't know what he's
Listen,
talking
that
about.
guy's this close to perjury himself. Like,
Arrest him. Arrest Fauci. But yeah, no chance of arresting Fauci. He should be at home praying for a happy death or something.
scroll
you know
down
what I
a
mean?
bit. So
Isn't he
let's see if
80
we get the gist
something?
of it. He's in his 80s. He's been there 4 decades now. He must have secrets on people.
The revelation vindicates Republican Senator Rand Paul, who got into a heated exchange with National Institute of Allergy, blah, blah, blah. Fauci during this May and July testimonials. Yeah, so Fauci, there you go. Fauci's outed as a liar, at least, or he's an idiot because he doesn't know what's going on in his own, in the institution that he funds. So should he not be removed from that position if he has no oversight over what is actually happening with funding and with research grants and etc.
No,
and
because-
research itself, shouldn't he be removed because he's obviously not in control of the NIH then, right?
He'll worm his way out of it because of paragraph 2. In the letter to a congressman, this Lawrence Tabak of the NIH cites, quote, a limited experiment that was conducted to test if spike proteins from naturally occurring bat coronaviruses circulating in China were capable of binding to the human ACE2 receptor in a mouse model, end quote.
What do you mean a limited experiment?
Limited, we just did a little bit. And
you-
that'll be watering down
What
the
do you-
truth
what do you mean
after
you
all
just
that.
did a little bit? Like you just got a little bit pregnant?
A little bit of a mouse or two.
And was there any results? Were they able to make the bat virus transmissible to humans as a result of this? I mean, well, transmissible to mice, which would suggest that it's possibly likely transmissible to other.
Don't know.
Don't know. Nobody knows, and you won't know.
Wasn't there something else about Fauci and dogs?
Fuck,
was
I
that?
didn't even want to talk about that because it was pretty distressing to
Okay.
me. I didn't want to even talk about it. I wanted to kill everyone
Right.
after reading about that, so I don't even want to talk about it. You can look it up yourself if you want.
Okay.
But, yeah.
We won't go there. There's depressing, and then there's,
Yeah, there's just-
wanting to
Yeah.
take an M16 out. Okay.
Well, not an M16. Multiple nuclear weapons.
To go nuclear. Okay.
Yeah.
We won't. Look it up, but it's horrifying. And
Taking
it's
out
typical
M16
of...
going postal is for losers.
Oh, yeah. You want to go full nuclear.
You go full nuclear, yeah. You get a nuclear sub, and yeah. Anyway, so yeah, lies upon lies, more lies. I don't know what else. It's just a bunch of lies, basically. The whole thing has been based on a lie.
The whole thing, the whole reality.
The whole reality, the whole pandemic, yeah, the whole reality, yeah. Well, it is. It kind of at this point, lies kind of define official lies define our reality because they define what people think and believe, and then they embody that, and then they spread that, and they're embodying lies and disinformation and just a false view of reality. I mean, yeah. So I mean, if most people on the planet believe falsehoods about major events and what's happening in the world and how they should operate in the world and you know, the minutiae of their lives from the big things to the small things, if what they believe about those and how it informs their actions are all based on falsehoods, then yeah, the whole world is operating on.
And yet
on a lie.
it still functions.
It functions, but
It's remarkable.
well,
that
yeah, but
it
the thing
does
is,
function at all.
in a way that would
Coming back to what we were opening with, it can't last.
no, it can't last. But that would suggest that the standard, normal nature of human existence is subjectivity, bullshit, basically, like some level of bullshit. It's just whenever the bullshit gets too extreme and too many people embody the
There
bullshit,
must be
that you're deluged in a
thresholds.
pile of bullshit.
Yeah. Beyond which is just unsustainable.
The whole thing collapses, yes, because it changes the way people act. I mean, that's what we're seeing with the whole COVID pandemic and the restrictions and the effects that it's having.
And the nastiness of people.
Well, that and also, but
Rejecting, they won't take kids who need emergency help at hospitals because they're not vaxxed, that kind of shit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's in the details where it's impacting individual people's lives in a serious way.
Their behavior is
Seriously
changing
negative-
into
seriously negative
extremely
way.
crual and harmful ways that cause
Towards
and
other people.
amplify, ripple
Right.
out suffering everywhere.
Right, but that's suffering. But then other effects have an effect on the entire global system, as we've been talking about in previous weeks, that we think anyway, or is looking like is building up to some kind of a serious economic crunch.
Right.
That is going to, I don't know, it's going to be bad. Like it's not going to be good. It's going to make COVID a thing, a distant memory. It's going to make COVID pale in comparison, if it happens. Of course, Jack Dorsey thinks it's going to happen, right?
Well,
do
that's
you have his
interesting.
tweet?
Yeah, I gave it to Scotty earlier. Let's look at what
A very short tweet.
Dorsey.
Beardy
has to
Dorsey.
say.
Beardy-
He's come down from his lofty
Lofty commie castle
commie hipster retreat to tweet this
yesterday. Hyperinflation is going to change everything. It's happening. Well, thanks, Jack.
Hashtag Bitcoin. He's obviously on the Bitcoin train.
Right.
What does that mean? Well, they're spinning this. The media is reporting on this. Oh, look at this insider has to say. I don't really think Jack is an insider. He might be the head of a quote-unquote big tech company. It doesn't really make him an insider. I think it's more like an honest take. He's smart. Let's give him some kudos. He's smart. He may not know economics as well as whatever, but
I wouldn't say it's that he's smart. He's hearing that from other people. Obviously, he's going to meetings. He has hookups with different people in industry and all that.
This is
kind
what
of
I'm
stuff.
hearing on the grapevine.
Exactly. So, and of course, you don't need to hear it in the grapevine. You don't need to have those kind of contacts to hear that kind of stuff. It's in the media, right? It's been in the media over the past number of weeks.
Not the H word, but yeah.
Hyperinflation, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, inflation going up, it's only a small step to hyperinflation, or to think that this is going to go.
I checked it up. The definition of hyperinflation is when you hit the threshold of a 50% increase per month.
Yeah.
We're not
well, it
there.
can go there,
but you can
the
see it go.
Yeah, the initial steps have to be taken before you get there, right? But I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, we're not economists or whatever, and it's obviously economics.
Even the economists don't know when it happens.
Well, economics is a nightmare trying to figure out all of the different
Historians
mechanisms.
do.
Huh?
Historians do.
No, but economics is a nightmare in terms
To
of
forecast, yeah.
Well, to forecast and to understand the mechanisms behind it all and how I'm sure an economist would be able to tell you, or I think he'd be able to tell you exactly how it all works and why different things happen, but I don't really believe that.
A key feature of it is hoarding.
Well, no, inflation is basically the rise in the cost of goods, and goods rise. One of the reasons that products or goods rise in cost is because of scarcity, and right now we have scarcity because of COVID.
Because of the government response to COVID.
Yeah, because of hysterical government responses to a non-pandemic.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much your short and sweet explanation of why we're facing into inflation and possibly hyperinflation in the future. I mean, we talked in previous shows about transport ships. You can look at yourself on the web, or you can even go directly and look at Ship Tracker. Just put in Ship Tracker website our ship tracker into Google or something, you'll find there's a main ship tracker website, shows you all and you can break it down by just cargo ships or tankers, just cargo ships. And you can see how many are sitting off different ports and stuff. You know, there's a lot of them sitting off the port in California. Something like 100 ships or something like that, 70, 100 ships been sitting there for different periods of time, unable to come into port because of problems in removing containers from the port, so more containers can't come in.
Yeah. The most famous case of hyperinflation is probably Nazi Germany, pre-Nazi Germany, late Weimar Germany. There's some historical debate as to how much of that was contrived, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But leaving that aside, the first known in historical times instance of hyperinflation happened 5-6 years after the French Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the revolution was still underway. You know, it was a bloody process full of the terror and so on. As the revolution kind of started to eat its own as it got underway, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Historical. It has some echoes with today. You know, the revolution to the progress revolution.
Mm-hmm.
But not only that, it's kind of infecting everything, as we discussed last week, with extremist ideologies at the top and filtering down and out.
Yep.
It's everything. It's the climate change agenda, it's the woke agenda, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
The revolutionary fervor behind much of the apparently crazy decisions being taken at government level.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, hyperinflation, French Revolution, Green Revolution.
Yeah, it's a different time though than the French Revolution, obviously. That we live in today. The dynamics can be the same, but obviously it'll play out very differently in a world where there's probably French Revolution probably was 240 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably maybe a billion people on the planet then, so probably about 70 times the number of people on the planet, and obviously a very different planet in terms of the way people live their lives and the way they get information and what they know. That's the main thing though, is how people get the information that people are able to access. I don't know if we've said this before, but it's something that always occurs to me, is just how unique this time in history is because of the most important commodity, which is information. The most important commodity in human affairs is information, and how much accurate information human beings possess.
Because knowledge is power.
Well, about themselves, about the world, and how they should act in the world based on that knowledge. And of course, people are flooded with information, not knowledge, but information these days, and a lot of it is disinformation, which means that they end up with wrong information in their heads, and then that leads to actions that are, you know, don't map to reality, or don't are incongruent with what's actually happening around them, or how they should act. You know, how they should respond to the environment. People are responding to the environment in completely the wrong way today.
Yeah, like Jack Dorsey censoring everyone left and right.
Well, there's that. There's also people completely responding incorrectly to the environment in terms of a virus. You know, a virus that has a 0.2% death rate, so 99 point something high survival rate, and yet everybody has lost their shit over the past 18 months over it, directly as a result of governments encouraging people to lose their shit over a virus that is really
encourage them to misread the situation.
Misread it.
To treat it as Berenson calls it, the plague di tutti plague.
Yeah, the plague.
The mother of all
plagues.
plagues.
Yeah.
Can we look at that one?
Yeah, sure.
Alex Berenson, there's a prime example of someone booted off Twitter by Dorsey.
For telling the truth.
For mapping for simply stating the data, and therefore mapping what's really going on to reality. And in the end, if hyperinflation does arise, contributing to that, thanks Jack. This is his latest Substack, where you can still get his updates. We recommend people subscribe to him there. Virus gonna virus. Okay, so this is what I've been saying throughout, but it's a very good short post. Here we are, 2 years in. The plague of all plagues, the virus with a 3 in 1,000 death rate, 0 in 1,000 for the non-elderly and morbidly obese.
Mm-hmm.
Along the way, states have all kinds of strategies, like we discussed last week, from zero COVID to zero restrictions, early vaccines to late vaccines to no vaccines. So then he's like, well, let's pull up the stats and see how a bunch of countries are doing. Looking at charts over the last 18 months, the whole span of it.
Yeah.
Here's the UK.
7%
Early
vaccinated.
lockdown, 70% lockdown,
7% vaccinated.
vaccinated.
And these are, well, these cases? Yeah, cases.
Cases, which we know. Cases.
Well, that's just a normal spike of a seasonal virus, seasonal respiratory virus. The normal
Although-
ebb and flow of a seasonal respiratory virus.
amplified by amplified by calling a case someone who tests positive when they aren't actually having symptoms.
Well, or even just
but still the pattern.
Well,
up
even
and
just
down.
reporting cases, amplified by the fact that they're actually reporting the cases. You can see these graphs for the flu,
Mm-hmm.
if you ever bothered to look at them, or even if the government or the media ever bothered to show them to you, ever cared to show them to you, you'd see exactly the same kind of graphs for UK flu transmission and seasonality.
Here's a wave and here's another wave.
Yeah, well, here's a wave in going into autumn and over the winter, and then down in the summer in the warmer months, then back up in the autumn. All of the restrictions did nothing to change that. All of the vaccines have done nothing to change that. Except they would say that those spikes would be massively higher without the vaccines, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
So that was UK. Then the next one, yeah, not so good, blah, blah, blah. Next one's India, 20% fully vaccinated. Very few with mRNA vaccines,
Right.
so hardly anybody vaccinated. And there's India. Now, India's in a different climate, so it has a different kind of seasonality to those kind of respiratory viruses. So obviously you see spikes at different times of the year. But
Do you
again,
remember that's when the media was going, "Oh Lord, look at
yeah,
India."
back in April, yeah. And then, but then since then, 20% vaccination, almost nobody with an mRNA vaccine. And since, that's probably like since June, about June maybe, July maybe, basically down to nothing. Of course, India, in many parts of India, big rollout of ivermectin as part of health kits to large percent of the population. Still doing it to this day, actually, even though there was a kind of ban put on it, but apparently local and regional health authorities have said not to recognise that ban because it worked, basically.
Right.
In Uttar Pradesh, I think 300 million people in Uttar Pradesh, a region in India, were given, most people given these health kits with ivermectin as the primary medicine.
Zinc and vitamin D.
They basically wiped out cases with ivermectin. But forget about, you're not allowed to talk about ivermectin, it's only for horses, so carry on.
Okay, the next one he says, yeah, they have
Colombia.
Spain.
Very late, very hard, early lockdown, 39% fully vaccinated. So Colombia, super hard lockdown. And again, different seasonality for a virus in somewhere like Colombia compared to the Northern Hemisphere. But again, yes, they tend to have different type of spike, basically. But again, coming down now after, what did they say, 40% vaccination?
Yeah.
The point of this is that there's these different, like there's 7% vaccinated in one country, 20% in another country, 40% in another country, hard lockdowns, no lockdowns, and you see a kind of seasonality based on their climate, basically, and
Yes.
the way viruses work.
And it's
in that
not
part of the world.
correlated with when a government did anything.
It's not correlated with anything. It's correlated with the seasonality of a virus, of a respiratory virus. What was this one? Not the last one? No,
It's
Russia.
describing
Yeah.
Russia.
And then
Look
Russia
at that.
again.
Up and down, up and down.
July, look at that. Oh, July kind of low, really, dropping way off in July. Then scooting back up into autumn, over December, January, February, kind of peaks, whatever, February, back down, April, May, June, July, back up, starting to go back up in August a little bit. Again, this is cases. Doesn't speak to anything about actual deaths, etc.
What does he say on that? Mother Russia.
Clearly some hard lockdowns are in order, yeah. And then
Oh.
he goes to Australia. Super
Right.
hard lockdowns, explicit zero COVID strategy, late aggressive vaccinations. Maybe they have the answer, but if you scroll down, you see, no, Australia doesn't have the answer either. They were basically, interestingly, when they had no vaccination campaign, that was during their super hard lockdown. But for most of that period of time, from like really from like September last year, right the way through to now, or just recently, Australia had lockdown and it was flatlined. So the super hard lockdowns, yeah, works for. I mean, you take away people's, civil liberties completely, and you have zero COVID cases, or almost zero COVID cases. But then you start a vaccination campaign coming into, late summer and into fall.
Well, they're summer now.
Yeah, sorry, they're summer now. Yeah, exactly.
It's spring there at the moment. Yeah.
But that's kind of interesting because it's spring. Well, but what's interesting there is in May, June, July in their winter season. But maybe I don't know. Australia's kind of a weird place. They even have winter there. It depends where you live. Anyway, basically you're looking at just a seasonality there. But it's not an accurate reflection of the seasonality of a virus because of lockdowns. Because lockdowns do have an effect on transmission. If you lock people in their apartments and don't stop them spreading, or in their flats, in their houses, whatever, and you will stop transmission of all sorts of viruses.
One government intervention that will work. Because face masks doesn't seem to correlate at all.
No, face masks, nothing. No. You lock people down and you will have people stop spreading things amongst each other.
They'll stop spreading everything.
Yeah, pretty much everything. But then they open it up and vaccinate everybody and cases go all the way up again. So everybody, not everybody, but they're getting up there 70 in different cities, 70, 80% of the population vaccinated, and cases are way up again. Yeah, the bottom line, lockdown measures, social distancing measures, vaccination campaign does nothing to change the overall ebb and flow of viral transmission. And the bottom line here is, like you said, well, lockdowns work, right? That's the one thing that we're right about. Well, lockdowns work for what? To stop the spread of a virus that does what? Do we have to go back to, we really have to go back to 18 months ago when that data was already in, that this particular virus is dangerous only to people in the same demographic that the flu and other respiratory viruses are dangerous to. Who is this?
That's China.
See what he says here. Okay, there's one exception. There's one exception, he says, to government interventions.
It's China.
Not working.
Right.
China.
Government
somehow, he's obviously heavily on the sarcasm. Somehow, Xi and Xi, the dear leader and the bat lady, have managed to make COVID go bye-bye without a single jab of our fancy Western vaccines.
Yeah.
And the chart
shows big spike in, what's that, like March last year.
Oh, that's their February. That's when
February, March.
The mayhem was going on January, February.
And then flatline all the way since then. 18 months of flatline in China. No cases. Awesome. China gonna China.
What do you think? He says it's a miracle, I tell you, a miracle. So he's obviously sarcastic about, what is he being sarcastic about there when China is put against everyone else?
Well, he's suggesting that China is not reporting its cases like a good boy, like a good Chinese boy should do, which is report your cases to everybody.
I know in the past
test for them all over the place.
I've been confused because in past weeks I've been pointing out that, well, China didn't really bury this. They're still going along with it, having a mini lockdown here and there. Yeah. They're still quarantining travelers when they return. But I'm wondering now about the veracity of those reports. I'm reading Western reports about those, which gives the impression that the narrative, Chinese official narrative of how they're treating this is zero COVID. If it arises, holy Jesus, shut everything down. Yeah. That's what they're doing officially. But you look at those charts, there's no case-demic. There's no ping-demic. They're not doing mass testing. They gave it up, which speaks to what you were saying. They dropped this in February 2020.
Well, they published. I mean, it was
essentially in practice.
Of course they did. I mean, you go back to papers from then that we were actually citing from China, because the first studies on the virus were done in China, because that's where it first appeared, sort of. At least that's where it appeared on the international stage, or in the public.
Where it was first publicly observed.
Publicly recognized. But of course, there's a suggestion that it was actually spreading in the US in the summer of 2019, and was called a strange vaping illness.
Syndrome, yeah.
Vaping syndrome. But anyway, so our just so people know, our thesis is that it basically came from Fort Detrick. It was manufactured in a lab in Fort Detrick, and was spread to China. It was taken to China probably during the international military games, and was, probably consciously dumped on their doorstep in order to do everything that they've done with it since then, which is called it the China virus, and put pressure on China. It's kind of geopolitics. You know when you shoot down an airplane like MH17, and the very next day, with 298 people on board and all dead, you shoot down MH7 or not MH17. Was it MH17?
17.
Yeah, MH17 over Ukraine, and the very next day, Western newspapers have massive headlines saying Putin killed my baby. So you're blaming Putin while the wreckage is still burning. That's using
Geopolitics.
public international smear campaigns against your enemies. And it's done by the West, and it's been done by the West repeatedly against its peer enemies over the past, forever really. But so the same applies here. Look what has happened. You look at what has happened with this virus and how it evolved and what it's being called now. It's being called the China virus, the Wuhan virus, Bat Lady, as Berenson talks about and stuff. It's all focused on China. China did this. It fits very neatly into the past form of Western governments, particularly the US, but the British as well, in attacking their peer competitors that have risen and continue to rise over the past 20 years to equal status and possibly superior status, and they attack them because they don't want to be unseated as the global hegemon. So they attack their peer competitors, and they can't attack their peer competitors because they're peers, essentially, at least militarily, and in China's case, certainly economically. They can't attack them directly with traditional military means. They attack them with smear campaigns. They try to tarnish their image and rubbish their image, and the Chinese take it seriously, and Russia has always taken it seriously. And it does have an effect because it then can lead to, and has led to, governments in the West using that smear, that allegation that you shot down a plane, you've invaded Crimea, you're doing all sorts of bad things. In the case of China, you unleashed a deadly virus that you made in your lab on the world. It manifests in the form of sanctions. It turns the heads, it turns politicians in the home countries and Western countries against that government, the targeted government, and you impose sanctions, and you
Have they actually done that? Have they gone that far? I'm not sure.
For COVID.
Sanctions against Chinese officials. I mean, there's been a trade war that overlaps with this.
Not yet. I mean,
but I will give you that if what you said earlier, the information is key. Mm-hmm. The key thing here then is that it's supposed to turn heads against any, not idealization of China per se, but a reality-based look. Just look over there and what is happening over there. They want to make sure that your perception of rising China is blackened as much as possible.
And your perception.
So that you go, this is bad news, China rising, China developing, China having increasing influence in Africa and Asia. Yeah. This is absolutely terrible. Look what they did to the whole world with the COVID thing. Right. Ergo, can China we trust them with having, they will upend our rules-based international order, and it will be just awful.
Or quote-unquote rules-based international order, which is basically what they're saying as euphemism for they will upend us as the global hegemon.
Yeah.
Which at this point America doesn't deserve to have in any way, politically, economically, culturally. It doesn't deserve to be the greatest nation on the earth and the top dog in the world. It doesn't deserve that anymore. Not just deserve, but it is not that anymore.
Not least because of the way it just floundering in debt.
Yeah,
and doesn't give a shit
it's
about
going
the
down
stability
big time,
of things.
They're desperately trying to hold on to that position, and it's the death throes, and they're lashing out, and their attitude, their ideology of themselves as the shining city on a hill, the exceptional nation, the world's greatest superpower, all that kind of stuff. They will not give that up.
This is why
they will not give that up because they're too identified with it, and they're not willing to share power. There could be a multipolar world, as China and Russia have been lobbying for many years, but America will not accept the multipolar world, and it's pathology. When you realize your time is done and you're no longer able to be number one in the world, rationally you should agree to share power, and agree or accept the facts on the ground that there are other powers in the world who are as powerful or more powerful than you, and you should readjust your position and your image of yourself. But these people, given their nature and the pathology that by which they're possessed, or the ideology of which they're possessed, they're not willing to do it, and they will, instead of playing fair and accepting facts, they will try to destroy the person who is taking their place.
Given that premise that COVID-19, the COVID story was dumped in China's hands. So they're left holding the bloody knife, right? If we go with that premise, then is Build Back Better the West's, the US is really, whatever, the West's answer to or attempt to usurp or stave off or buy out, whatever, China's One Belt, One Road? Does that make sense at a kind of geoeconomic
Well, what's Build
big
Back?
scale?
What's Build Back Better though? What's behind Build Back Better?
Well, you get this thing coming up immediately after the pandemic starts.
Yeah, but what's behind Build Back Better? It's just a slogan. I mean, One Belt, One Road isn't just a slogan. We know what it is. What's behind Build Back Better?
The green agenda, the climate economy, the greening of the economy, the massive infrastructural bipartisan thing that's going on in the US at the moment. First announced by AOC, and people like snorted at it at the time. It's now like it's a real thing now.
Well, that could well be an example of them responding to the rise of China economically and the knitting together that we've talked about in previous shows about Eurasian integration, where you have knitting together of the Eurasian landmass, primarily motivated by China and Russia with its energy resources and China with its population and its labor force, essentially, to, knit together Eurasian countries starting from China all the way over to Western Europe. And of course that would definitely spell the end of American hegemony in the world. That would be reduced to a kind of like a very second-rate nation in the world. And of course that whole China's One Belt, One Road initiative and Eurasian integration has to be fueled, or is set up to be fueled, by fossil fuels and the energy from fossil fuels, from oil, gas, building pipelines, railroads, all that kind of stuff.
Expanding industry, expanding civilization, development.
Right, based on fossil fuels though. So if you wanted to destroy that, you would suddenly push an agenda that says that all of the energy sources that you need to integrate Eurasia and to make Eurasia the center of the world and to sideline America, they're bad. And in fact, they're morally bad. They're not just bad economically, they're morally bad. And if you pursue fossil fuel energy sources, then you're evil and coercing people to go green. I mean, if you go green, it equalizes everything out, because then it's a new playing field, a new ball game essentially, and there's a totally different playing field where it's no longer based on who has all the oil. I mean, the world has been dominated. The current world order we have today is based on where fossil fuels were located and who got to control them. That's what the world order today is based on.
Yeah,
if
you Anglo-American Seven Sisters, big oil companies.
Right, absolutely. And the West is based on fossil fuels. China got in with that. Obviously, Russia was a big part of that as his own major fossil fuel.
And they're trying to sway Saudi Arabia away from the West.
Right, exactly. If you center the world in Eurasia and they grow in power and control and they become the new top dog in the world, well, then America's not happy. The ideologues in America have been there, remember, for quite a long time. You could say maybe 200 years. They've dominated the world, and they're not happy with the idea of that massive change in the global order.
Yeah.
And it's not beyond belief that the whole green agenda, just to answer your question, and it's not beyond belief that the whole green agenda could be a way to prevent that ultimate rise of China and Russia.
We're having to speculate here, because you asked me straight up, okay, then what is behind Build Back Better?
Yeah.
I can state it for you with One Belt, One Road, New Silk Roads, because it's out there, it's frank, it's publicly discussed. There are practical deals in place. The Asian Development Bank, of which even the UK flew over to sign up to. You know what I mean? There's nothing I can say. Well, I can point to it. I can't really, although you've done a good attempt to describe it, because it's inherently confusing. Nobody knows.
You mean Build Back Better?
Build Back Better. Well, the one thing that is not is that just this model just appeared. It can be traced to the World Economic Forum, i.e. the Davos Sets publication on their websites. It just appeared as a slogan behind the Conservative Party, behind the Democratic Party in the US.
The Canadians.
Last summer. The Canadians.
India
New
bit,
Zealand. Pakistan a bit.
Yeah.
But
the West,
it's really a Western thing, and it's really an Anglo-Saxon thing, Anglo-American thing.
Well, I never knew. I saw it like repeatedly being used, and there's just kind of newsreels or reels of these different leaders all using the same term: build back better, different.
You won't hear Xi use it.
No, exactly, yeah.
So when people say, "Oh, they're all the globalists and they're all in bed together," especially the Chinese communists, no, they're not in on this.
for a long time, I just thought it was just some catchphrase that they were using, to a vague catchphrase to say, "Let's improve the economy" or some bullshit, right? But if you're saying that it is directly tied to the whole greening of the economy and stuff, then yeah. Of course, we talked about that in previous shows about how unworkable that whole thing is. The whole green agenda, how completely unworkable it is, and
Kamala Harris was trying to sell it last week. She was giving some speech in New York with Build Back Better in large print behind her. And what she was selling specifically was the bipartisan infrastructure deal, the Green New Deal, basically reincarnated post-COVID in the after times. She got heckled. Now, there's not too much, I don't want to read, I'm straight up front, I'm reading more into this than what was said, but I still thought it was an interesting juxtaposition of things and worth commenting on. Can you play that, Scotty? This is a video of a heckler interrupting Kamala Harris during her Build Back Better speech. I think I just sent it, did I? I did, yeah.
It's about better health. It's about better jobs. And intentionally, it is about our families.
What about the families who drowned? 8 families drowned here in Queens. It could have been prevented if we had the right infrastructure.
You are right, brother.
I am right about that. And the Chinese
testify, brother.
That poverty is a choice. Why aren't we working with the Chinese on their Belt and Road Initiative?
Okay,
the bankers run a dictatorship here. We need to pass Glass-Steagall back.
But right now, let's talk about the agenda.
No, the agenda doesn't address the fact that people are going to die if there's another hurricane.
All people and allowing
There's been
everybody
planned
to be heard.
shrinkage
That's
of benign
part of what we want in
neglect.
our democracy. Everybody gets their chance to talk.
You can pause there, Scotty. Okay, a couple of things. He mentioned the Glass-Steagall Act. That is something that is brought up over and over by the LaRouches. Now, who are they? Lyndon LaRouche was on, basically several decades ago, onto pretty much a kind of global civilizational expansion of industry project, grand idea, just as very similar to what the Chinese under Xi came up with in 2013. That's why, they're like, they love China for this. They kind of hold their nose when it comes to the communist aspect, because they're far more of a libertarian, nationalistic American bent. But anyway, so Glass-Steagall is another thing they harp on. This guy is probably informed by that, and that's why he brought it. Most people will not get these references. But I think it's interesting that he did do that, because by heckling that, he got One Belt, One Road, China's global vision for what to do about this situation versus what Kamala Harris stood there representing, Build Back Better.
Glass-Steagall is basically...
I think it gets to the heart of everything. Glass-Steagall was, the banking law that was imposed after the Great Depression to prevent a situation where banks would be operating as investment funds, as businesses, in the way that Glass-Steagall was basically lifted, I think, under the Clinton administration in the 90s, and did certainly contribute to the massive financial crisis in 2008. So the repealing of legislation...
He's saying basically that the banking interests are preventing that own vested interests, and it's West-centered, right? They're basically in line with the ideology of the West is best.
100%.
And they're anti-China.
100%. The former head of the Bank of England, Sir David King, the guy is all over the place these days with the green agenda and Build Back Better and stuff like that. I think it gets to the heart of everything, because if what we're saying geopolitically holds, then if Build Back Better is the kind of Western consortium, the Western banking cartel, whatever exactly that entity or overlapping series of entities is if that's their answer to One Belt, One Road, COVID-19 comes along and conveniently contrives to force reboot
The Western economy,
The Western economy-
global economy.
and via this initiative that otherwise would never have been rolled out
Right.
because it would have. How would you do it in a Western
Well, you have to-
multilateral democratic system?
Well, they have to
you need
destroy
a crisis to just force it in.
You have to destroy the current world economy based on fossil fuels and to impose a greening of industry. Basically, you have to destroy it. You can't phase it out. I mean, it's tied with the whole global warming and climate change stuff, and we're told that it's too late already, right? I mean, we're told in the 1980s that by 2000 cities would be
Here's the
underwater.
thing,
and
like
stuff.
you said yourself, I don't think they're serious about it. I think it has more to do with ideological reasons, that they wanted to keep the realm,
to focus on them.
yeah, ideologically
As the-
close.
as the
They're not
initiator of-
actually serious about gutting. I mean, look at Germany. It's got Nord Stream 2. It's being hampered, but the fact is it's built.
Mm-hmm.
Macron wants to reinvest more in nuclear energy.
So it can't just be
They're
talk. though.
talk. It's talk. It's ideological, paramolistic. They don't really believe their own bunk, but it gets a slogan. It gets a campaign going to keep the West together. Otherwise, you've got a one belt, one road reality economics, picking people off one by one. Suddenly, Turkey does a deal for, Jesus, the thing that kicked off World War One. You know, a trans
Yeah.
railway line that goes from
Iraq.
Germany to Baghdad, that kind of thing. And it's just a one-off deal. And Turkey would be like, well, you don't have to sanction the shit out of us for doing just this one. It's just one infrastructure project. We get rich, you get rich. You can join in. But they're like, it's not about the money. Sure, we could send HSBC Bank in there and we could get a take for London. But that's not, you don't understand. We're not in it just for the money, return on the investment of the specific project. It's the overall thing we're trying to put a break on.
It's about remaining relevant then.
Yeah.
It's having the focus, is what you're saying. It's maintaining the focus on the West as the initiator of,
And the moral
of-
arbiter of who gets what and why.
Yeah, the initiator of progress.
Yes.
Of a new paradigm, of a change or whatever. But they're not going to impose any real green agenda or green.
No, it's the
greening of the
ideological vehicle to
infrastructure.
get Western support, Western soft-hearted liberal lefties support behind it.
Right.
They're just
ultimately
using people.
Yeah, to keep the population focused on the West as best.
The West is the
Because
best.
that's ultimately
Because look at those Chinese polluters,
Right.
you know, that kind of thing.
So the only real valuable commodity to these people is the attention and the allegiance of their populations and the population of as much of the world as possible. And certainly they can't get all the world's population, but certainly the population that's under their that is under their control, i.e. the Western populations, they have to keep them ideologically unsung with the idea that the West is the top dog in the world.
Yeah.
And keep them
And
anti those others, anti-China,
And if
anti-Russia.
anyone else were to challenge it, and as you said to me earlier, just even share the table.
Yeah,
with us.
yeah.
Holy shit.
That's as-
and
that's as
that's
bad as
why,
losing it,
in
yeah.
the end, you think,
Sharing is as bad as losing. For
what
them.
did you have to say about Trump? That their ideological problem with Trump was that they could foresee, even though he was talking big on antagonism with
Anti-China,
China,
China. But he was going to
he
do
was
it from
inevitably, as a normal person, going to end up
doing
sharing
deals.
the
He was going to
table.
do a deal. He was probably talking about his great ability to, the art of the deal and all that kind of stuff, and how he was going to do the best deal ever, with China and stuff. But ultimately, that would be a sharing of power, and it would involve an acceptance of China's position in the world as this, major economic, probably the preeminent economic powerhouse in the world. He would have to accept that, and America would have to take its rightful position, which is not on the top in that respect. So that's why they hated him for that, and wanted to get rid of him, because they're focused on ideology. Trump is focused on practicalities and business deals. Theirs is ideology, and it's like you said, it's not about money. It's about having the allegiance of the world. It's about belief, essentially. Like we were saying earlier on, it's about what ideas and thoughts and beliefs, information is in people's heads, what they think, and that's the only really valuable commodity, currency to them, is what's in people's heads. Which of course ties back to COVID and stuff. Whenever you feel that that's getting away from you, what do? You lock them down. You know what I mean? You put them into a state of fear and you corral them, basically. If your herd's getting spooked and is looking elsewhere, looking to greener pastures or looking to different pastures, well, then you get the sheepdogs out and you herd them into a corral and tell them to stay there,
Yeah.
It's a last ditch effort type thing. It's a
And once you see the world through that lens, all kinds of other things open up. You like what you've all said about the example that you gave at the time was a horrific terror attack in New Zealand. Okay, there are many effects that's going to happen. One of the thoughts that will pop up in people's head when they reflect on it, maybe it didn't even come to the surface, but in their minds, if they ever thought, the world's going a bit crazy, I'll relocate to New Zealand. Down there will be fine.
yeah.
But no, it's almost like a preemptive, systemic
Putting a block.
saying to you,
There's
you
no
think
safe
you
place.
can go to Antarctica and escape this?
Yeah.
Watch what we can do.
Despite all the safe spaces going on around
Yeah.
the world today, there are no safe spaces. That's been. They're making sure of that, or trying to make sure of that people feel very unsafe all the time. Which, again, is pandemia. Attention, citizens of pandemia. Yeah, and they're not giving up on it. I mean, we just talked about a little while ago there about vaccinations and stuff. And I mean, I just sent you one there from Forbes, Scotty. Pfizer talking about its booster, because now it's boosters are where it's at, right? UK, US, pretty much everywhere. Although some countries are still, they're trying to catch up and stuff. They're still doing the vaccination campaign, but the first 2 doses. But countries that were on first in the West, in particular, it's all about the boosters. Now, the interesting thing about Pfizer says its booster shot shows 95.6% efficacy against COVID-19. But the interesting thing about that headline, that this dude who wrote about it, Robert Hart in Forbes, he doesn't have the mental acumen to understand that by definition means that the first 2 shots are useless. Right? Because this booster is for people who have had 2 shots. So, like, it's been 6 months for a lot of people, for most people, since they had their first 2 shots of Pfizer. 6 months after they've had the first 2 shots of Pfizer, their booster is 95% efficient at preventing those people with the vaccine from getting sick or dying. Which means without the booster, you have a 95.6% chance of getting sick and dying with your 2 vaccines. So, I mean, what that means is that's after 6 months. It means that after 6 months, your vaccines are no good. And then in 6 months' time, you need another booster.
Right.
And 6 months after that, you need another booster. So what effectively has happened here is that vaccines have replaced your immune system. For people who have taken on these vaccines no longer, people no longer have immune systems. And this is for a virus with a 99.7678% survival rate for the vast majority of people, i.e. your own immune system is 99.8% efficient at protecting you from this virus, but that's dismissed in favor of a vaccine. And why would they do that? Well, it's making them shitloads of money.
Exactly. And that now, things like that, developments like this, now map to the reality, in quotes, a pseudo-reality that they changed. For example, the World Health Organization changing the definition of what it means.
What herd immunity means. Herd immunity. Obviously, herd immunity is based on your immune system. So they removed herd immunity, i.e. they removed your immune system and said that it's vaccination. So that literally, I mean, that's if there's one thing you understand that's very, very clear with this entire situation over the past 18 months since this all started, is that they very clearly have said that your immune system, for the vast majority of people who have a healthy immune system, and it's more than capable of dealing with the vast majority of all viruses effectively, they're saying that doesn't work anymore. All of a sudden, no more. Immune system doesn't really exist.
Oops, it's broken. Now you need us.
Yeah.
All the time.
And yeah, and there's some truth to it in a certain sense, although it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the vaccines do compromise your immune system and make it less capable of fighting off some viruses, particularly coronaviruses, different types of coronaviruses, because the vaccines with the spike protein focus your immune system on the spike protein.
Yeah.
rather than on the whole virus, which your own immune system focuses on the whole virus. The vaccines force your immune system to focus on just the spike protein, one part of the virus, which
Yeah.
means that it primes your immune system to focus only on that, which is a net reduction in efficiency of your immune system
Yeah.
by focusing only on one small part of the virus. So if another coronavirus or similar type of virus comes along, your immune system will be compromised in its ability,
Because it's been narrowed in
its focus. Yeah.
Did you get a chance to watch Alex Berenson's podcast with Joe Rogan?
No.
He does a good explanation of this. It doesn't contradict what you just said, but he said with headlines like this, he said they're getting away with that because it is factually true if, and then he lists them, these parameters hold true.
If you don't have an immune system.
He said they
Actually
can,
true.
Forbes can publish a headline like that, citing a Pfizer press release, 95.6 efficacy after all this time, because the antibody levels are sky high immediately after vaccination.
Yeah.
They will be light, and that's how they're testing. Their statistic isn't, their definition of what it means to be 95%, in this case 95.6% protected, is very, very simple. It's based on the antibody count resulting from the spike protein only, as you say, part of the virus, producing antibodies specifically to that spike protein. And so strictly speaking, by the definition they've narrowed down to these parameters, that headline is true for a month.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
After a month,
Or
it not only goes back to zero, it goes to worse than if you had been exposed to COVID and developed natural
Right, of course. But that's
antibodies.
that's well known that, I mean, there's been plenty of studies.
So the headline is true,
Particularly one out of Israel showing that
but it's a lie.
Yeah. Your own immune system, that the protection provided by your own immune system having been exposed to this virus is longer and stronger than the immunity or the protection provided by vaccines. I mean, that was a study out of Israel, 2.5 million people. That was the result of that study, that your own immune... Of course, people can dismiss that as well because they're still living in that fear, the fear produced particularly at the beginning last year, when everybody was convinced that if this virus even came close to them, they would be dead in a heartbeat, which is false. I mean, it's completely, it's just a massive lie. It goes back to what we said at the beginning of the show. We're just swimming in lies right now.
Yeah.
And of course, most people don't have the ability to check into the stuff and reason it out and think about it. And they don't have the well-founded a priori belief that, or understanding or skepticism about authorities.
Yeah.
Which you need to have. You need to have a skepticism about authorities.
They're always trying to sell you something.
And
It might be benign-ish.
Right.
It might be serious. They're trying to sell you something, though.
right. Well, pharmaceutical companies are an authority. People are listening to pharmaceutical companies and the researchers and the doctors that they employ who talk about vaccines and how wonderful they are. Put up the it's a Twitter link, Scotty. Francis, somebody, blah, blah, blah. It's just a compilation from not too long ago of stuff about, interesting stuff about pharmaceutical companies. Have a watch.
Tonight, keeping drug companies honest, a story that's simply stunning about multi-million-dollar profits and illegal activity at this country's biggest drug company.
The Justice Department alleges Johnson & Johnson boosted sales by paying millions of dollars in kickbacks to pharmacists and doctors who pushed the drug Risperdal to patients who did not need it.
The medical editors at that journal accused the drug company Merck of misleading them about the dangers of Vioxx, of hiding the fact that it caused even more heart attacks than previously known.
Johnson & Johnson paid $2.2 billion. Eli Lilly paid $1.4 billion. Pfizer and its subsidiary paid $2.3 billion. And GlaxoSmithKline paid out a record $3 billion.
For 7 years, Glaxo failed to report data showing its best-selling diabetes drug. Avandia increased the risk of heart attack by as much as 40%.
Opioid epidemic has killed more than 400,000 Americans. Tonight, Purdue agreeing to pay more than $8 billion in penalties.
Antidepressant Paxil wasn't approved for use by patients under 18. The company illegally marketed the drug for use by children, even when a clinical trial found teenagers who took the drug for depression were more likely to commit suicide than those taking a placebo.
Purdue Pharma pleading guilty to felony charges of defrauding federal health agencies and violating federal kickback laws for inducing doctors to prescribe those powerful opioids.
Glaxo also hired a company to write a medical journal article downplaying the risks. The firm used PR firms and paid several doctors, including the U.S. celebrity doctor Drew Pinsky, to promote the drug.
If you can't trust medical research that gets published in very established journals, what can you trust?
But as Bob Orr reports, the massive settlement may not lead to much change.
Is fraud the business model of the pharmaceutical industry?
No one's going to jail, no one's going to prison. And worse yet, they've set up a situation where Purdue's going to be able to continue on.
You look at this thing, and I mean, if Pfizer is too big to fail, and even the biggest fine in history is just a few months' profit, then what's going to stop it from illegally promoting other drugs?
Critics say, Anderson, nothing.
Illegally promoting other drugs like vaccines.
And keeping drug companies.
So
Jesus, so that's the before times.
Yeah, that was accepted.
When that was a scandal, now it's normal, and it's
but it's the same companies that are producing the vaccine. So, what argument does anyone have to against someone saying that, you know what, the past form and past history of these pharmaceutical companies in putting out experimental or newly developed drugs that had serious side effects that they played down, they covered up, and then paid out billions of dollars in fines to further cover up, essentially to silence people. Given that history, what argument is there for me to be skeptical about these vaccines, which are experimental, never before tested on large numbers of people? Well, that's the thing. The thing about it is, and I think I was saying this to you earlier on, at this point, I don't think that people out there in the world who are, to whatever extent they are, thinking this way, i.e. that people are unvaccinated are bad people and should get vaccinated, those people who think that way are angry about anti-vaxxers or people who are, skeptical of the vaccine or don't want to get the vaccine. They're not doing that. They don't have that opinion or that stance because they really believe that the vaccines are important for everybody's health. It's pretty clear at this point that most people of that opinion who think that way about it are vaguely, they probably don't even explain it to themselves clearly in this way, but their motivation for that is because they
want everyone else.
They're being told that they know that the government wants everybody to get a vaccine. The pharmaceutical companies and the representatives in the government want everybody to get a vaccine. And if you don't get a vaccine, you're not getting your life back. It's not for health reasons. It's for getting my life back. It's for freeing up my ability to travel, to go to stores, to go, because despite the fact that everybody was told that when you get vaccinated, life would go back to normal, you'd have all your freedoms back, as we'll see in a minute, most countries now are saying that vaccines aren't enough, that the restrictions, the social distancing measures, etc., will have to stay. People are still being encouraged to wear masks. Nothing really has changed for a lot of people who have been vaccinated. So people at this point are aware to one extent or another, most people, that the government is saying, get vaccinated and we will stop punishing you.
Yeah.
Not get vaccinated and in order to stay healthy, or not. People aren't thinking everybody needs to get vaccinated so that we're all protected against a deadly virus. I think most people, if they were honest with themselves, would recognize that there isn't really any pandemic. There never really was one, if there ever was one. And certainly if there ever was one, it's over now.
Yeah.
But so why are we still in this state of kind of fear and restrictions and stuff? Well, it's because the government is imposing it on us for some other reason.
Yeah.
And they can't do anything about the government doing that. They're living under a totalitarian, essentially, government in that respect. And they have to bow their heads and do what the government wants. And they're being weaponized. Those people who have taken the vaccine are being weaponized to attack people who are not vaccinated, because the government says those people need to be vaccinated in order for everybody to get their freedoms back.
Yeah. In a sense, the way you put it like that, it's almost like they've taken a rational position.
Right.
Look, okay, but there's evil shit in the world, and okay, a lot of it comes from government, but there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
So for God's sake, will you just take the vaccine? Because I'm here doing my part to get rid of this punishing totalitarian system we're in.
To appease it. To appease the tyrants.
What they'll tell themselves is, I'm doing my part, so for fuck's sake, will you do yours as well, so we can get this evil shit off our back?
Yeah.
Because I'm the one here taking all the punishment.
Right.
And you're just like, oh no, I'll never do that.
Yeah.
Great, so I'll just keep taking the punishment.
Yeah.
And that's how they're turning.
Yeah. But they're appeasing a tyrant. They're trying to appease a tyrant, which is a very bad thing to try and do, because tyrants as Alex Bernstein might say, tyrant's going to tyrant. You know, they're not going to stop tyrannizing you because they're if you want to go pathological.
Look how the goalposts keep changing. There is no 100% vaccination rate because they're like, well, you need more.
Yeah,
you need more.
And then because they enjoy it, you know. Just go to the Telegraph, Times.co.uk. Just an example of what I'm talking about here. These are just very recent. Well, this one's from actually today, the Sunday Times in the UK. Times.co.uk. Bring back social distancing to avoid a meltdown, says top scientist. That's top scientist says that kind of stuff. British
meltdown of what?
Meltdown in the middle of winter.
What? From
a
volcanic
meltdown,
eruptions in England?
A meltdown of keep the virus under control or it'll go crazy again, you know. Just jump to another one, like the kind of stuff that people are being subjected to. The Guardian, Scotty. This again from today. And something darker skies and colder weather provide perfect conditions for COVID-19 to thrive.
Shut up.
These were the words of the Health Secretary, UK Health Secretary last week is saying this. Then the chief of the next one, Telegraph, chief of the NHS, again yesterday, that's in telegraph.co.uk, get the booster jab to save Christmas, Britain's urged as country faces COVID crunch point. So get the booster jab if you want Christmas, not get the booster jab. I mean, it's in the headline there, and the way they say it to the people, and that, you can't blame people for understanding that what it really is. I mean, even though he would explain that saving Christmas means stopping spread of virus and cases and hospitalizations and overwhelming of healthcare system, blah blah blah. But the headline says is pretty simple, and most people only read the headlines. Get the booster jab to save Christmas can be easily interpreted as
I want
get
Christmas,
the booster jab,
so...
or you're not getting Christmas.
Yeah.
For no good reason other than I want you to get the jab. The point in that headline is get the booster jab. I want you to get the booster jab, not for any other reason other than get the jab. And if you get the jab, we'll give you Christmas. We'll give you a goodie. We'll give you a treat. If you don't get the booster jab, you're going to get beaten. Why do I have to get the booster jab? Shut up and get the booster jab or I'll beat you.
Yeah.
That's what's going on. And again, we keep coming back to this, the underlying claim that they would flesh it out with, i.e. that the virus is a deadly virus and people are going to die, is not supported by evidence or facts or data. This is a virus that we keep saying has a 99.767 or 8% survival rate, and it's only dangerous to the people to whom, for whom the flu and other similar respiratory viruses are dangerous. And we never cared about those people dying before. They're called dry tinder by government statisticians. Governments who every year, going back for, forever, look at death rates in country and how many people died in any given winter season or any season all through the year. They look at the winter, obviously in the Northern Hemisphere, a lot of older people in particular die, older frail people with multiple comorbidities die in the winter season, because when viruses spread around in a winter season, they're like, as doctors still call the flu, the old man's friend. You've got people in very at or past life expectancy age with multiple health issues for a long period of time. Something's going to knock them off at any time. Viruses come along and actually alleviate their suffering that they've been suffering for a long time by essentially kicking them off this mortal coil, right? And it was seen as, it is a normal part of life, a normal part of the way humans live and die, and it was always seen that way. But
I think
no longer.
If what you just said before holds, then even the authoritarians and the NPCs, whatever they are, after 18 months, I don't think they need any convincing with what you've just said here, reminding them of how benign this damn thing is. But what you said previously is what needs to be. In an ideal world, what would be deprogrammed from them? Because they keep trying to, they kind of know, and they just go like, look, I just want to travel.
They're responding as if they live under a tyrannical regime, a tyrannical government that is punishing them unless they do certain things. That's the way people are responding. So whether or not they can kind of, enunciate that or to have that clear in their own heads is kind of besides the point. Most of them don't, but that's the way they're that's the way they're responding. So,
Yeah.
and again, it's,
The
I mean,
behavioral manipulation.
yeah, more evidence of,
Was crafted, this situation.
yeah, nudges.
Nudge, yeah.
Nudge theory, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
An example of how other governments are all on the same page in this is like, there's a quick one from Jacinda Ardern, the other Twitter link there, Scotty. I wonder if she'd take that horse medicine, ivermectin. She should. Yeah, she just a quick one. She's asked a question, and she gives the answer.
So you basically see this is going to be like, well, it's almost like, you probably don't see it like this, the two different classes of people. If you're vaccinated or if you're unvaccinated, you have all these rights. If you are vaccinated...
That is what it is, so, yep. Yep. That is what it is, so, yep. Yep.
That's it.
That is what it is, so, yep. Yep.
So it's vaccine, it's apartheid, right? It's health apartheid, it's vaccine apartheid, but that's a means to an end in order to get people to take the vaccine, of course.
Which is also a means to an end.
Right. Well,
Which
yeah.
is to get compliance and to break down that last remaining cohort out there who were like,
yeah. So, you know, to what extent they'll go, how far they'll go, and she's voicing a policy that most Western countries are voicing as well, which is that,
and she smiled.
They're talking about it, about there being different rules for vaccinated and unvaccinated. To what extent they'll go, or how far they'll go with that, and imposing that, we don't know.
Oh well, Jesus! Look at Lithuania. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Last week, like they've gone full QR code. Like you can't go into it's what Macron wanted initially when he declared it in July.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go to stores without it. You can go to some smaller stores, but it's everywhere. You know, the entrance to the hospital, when you go sit down at the receptions just for your doctor, COVID check, QR check. How integrated is it? We've discussed this elsewhere. I don't know, but it's a small country. And it's probably not that hard. Apparently, from descriptions of people living there, it is freaking well integrated.
Yeah.
It's QR up the wazoo. You can't make a left turn without showing the QR code.
Yeah. Well, again, to what extent they'll go? I mean, maybe easier to
Globally.
do in a smaller country.
Yeah,
you know what
probably.
I mean? But you have more pushback in a bigger country, and I suppose each different country will play its part in that respect, based on its own, you know, the makeup of the population, the percentage of people vaccinated versus unvaccinated and stuff. Let's go to CNN there. An example of the I don't know what to call it. It's not even a lie. Just the headline. I mean, there's no need to read the article. It's the article. The headline isn't unrepresentative of the content of the article. It's quite representative. People vaccinated against COVID-19 less likely to die from any cause. Study finds. And they did a study, and go back to what you just heard about pharmaceutical companies paying people to produce studies, paying scientists to produce studies that play down or accentuate whatever they want, basically to lie, to create a bogus study that fudges the data in order to produce the right result. This is obviously one of those studies, but it says that in their study, people who got vaccinated, they compared to people who hadn't been vaccinated, and that people who had been vaccinated had lower risk of dying from anything. Everything. Cancer, heart disease, gunshot wounds, car crashes, choking on a peanut.
Get the jab, you'll live forever. No thanks.
Well, you might. That's what they're trying to say. I mean, that's the level of hubris around this whole thing, and the level of propaganda. It's been implied
throughout. It's kind of a There's a kind of a scientifical, magical undercurrent since March 16, 2020, which is that if you come with us, join the coronavirus SS,
right,
aboard this beautiful cruise ship, you'll live forever.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a lot more. It's when it comes down to the nitty gritty. Actually, it's more like, you join us or else.
Yeah.
You know, it's a gun
It's a
to your
threat.
head.
Yeah.
But there's also an elixir of a promise of, you know, utopia, eternity. Fucking.
Yeah.
It's horrific.
It's freaky. Well, just on that point, about vaccines lowering the risk from all sorts of, from everything else, right? From death, lowering the risk of death from anything if you get a vaccine. Just go to the, I think it's express.co.uk, Scotty. UK faces biggest cancer crisis in history. 60,000 years of life will be lost. So this is directly as a result of what governments have been doing vis-a-vis COVID over the past 18 months in the UK, and this is true in a lot of other Western countries. UK facing the biggest cancer crisis in living memory, and the country is on track to, well, blah, blah, blah.
Well, it's easy. They just need to read the CNN article, get the shot, and they'll live.
Well, if you look at the first paragraph, the oncologist Professor Pat Price will tell a cross-party group of parliamentarians at the Health Select Committee next Tuesday, that's this coming Tuesday, that the government is failing to acknowledge the magnitude of the cancer backlog. It will hear that tens of thousands of cancer patients have been left untreated or undiagnosed due to lack of access to healthcare or screening due to COVID restrictions. And this is going to be, the next paragraph is her presentation comes ahead of a new report to be released by King's College London, which shows over the last 18 months that there are 4 million fewer routine cancer referrals and 400,000 fewer urgent cancer GP referrals. So maybe those people should get vaccinated. Instead of screening them for cancer, just vaccinate them and then their cancer will go away, because vaccination reduces the risk of death from all causes, right? Well, this is what gets back to what we were saying earlier on. It's completely nonsensical, confusing, contradictory, just ridiculous.
Is this backlog, it's horrifying to imagine it, but let's get real with it. Is this backlog showing up yet in all-cause mortality rates?
It will, fairly soon.
A genocide by government.
But again, this is what always happens with these kind of scandals. This will come out at a time when they've moved on.
Yeah.
And there'll be some government, independent, probably not independent, they won't allow it to be an independent investigation, but there'll be a government investigation into itself and its handling, including the effect on cancer screenings and many other screenings for healthcare, basically, in general. And they'll say, yeah, some mistakes were made, but, whatever.
We saw one last week, the British one. Yeah, they have a parliamentary investigation into our handling of the lockdowns, and our conclusion is we didn't lock down hard enough, fast enough.
Yeah. Well, that's
how they spin it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, what else is COVID being used to cover up? It's not just present day and future scandals. It's been used to cover up a scandal that everyone knows about from what? 60 years ago?
Yep. Scotty, I've just sent you something.
A big old scandal that happened 1960.
But it's ancient history, Joe. Just forget about it. It's from the before times. Oh, my God.
Oh, the before times, yeah. JFK assassination documents. White House issues memo postponing disclosure, citing COVID. COVID is the gift that keeps on giving to psychos in power who want to cover up their crimes. Imagine using COVID to say that's why we can't release documents about who killed JFK.
So if you scroll down, the plausible narrative is the same one as for everything else, I suppose. In some areas it is plausible, but here it is. Biden issued a memo that said the National Archivist had recommended to him.
Of course he did, yeah.
That we cannot release the next batch of documents on JFK because COVID-19 pandemic has slowed down the process of reviewing whether redactions continue to meet the quote-unquote statutory standard. So the issue is we don't have enough staff to draw the black marker over all the things we don't want to release 60 freaking years after the fact.
Well, they're only censoring them now. Surely they censor
Well,
them
I think they
before
censor
now.
them on an ongoing basis depending on what's due, what's come up or something like that. There is some process to it, but obviously it's manipulated.
60 years?
Yeah,
And they can't figure out whether they...
Oh shit, Joe, there's 100-year ban on releasing documents for certain events, like mass shootings.
Yeah, I know. Go down. Is it on that one? Barring national security and privacy concerns, blah, blah. There was something about the standard explanation is that that it would have a negative impact on national security, foreign relations.
I'll read it out. I've got the paragraph in question. So the reason this latest delay is on top of a 3-year-old delay. This batch was supposed to be released in 2018. There, that paragraph. In 2018, Trump extended the deadline. So he himself was supposed to be released presumably under Obama. In 2018, Trump extended the deadline for the public release of the assassination files to 2021, this year, citing, quote, identifiable harm to national security. National security was the catch-all
national security
reason.
And foreign affairs and something else. There were 3 things that I read.
National security, law enforcement, or foreign affairs.
Right. So does no one ever wonder how that relates to foreign affairs? How does it relate to foreign affairs?
Well,
this was the
what
assassination.
people will take from it is, well, let me see. That was during the Cold War. Presumably that refers to the Soviet Union and Oswald's visits there. But what if there have been other releases in other contexts? Nothing to do with the assassination per se, but the release of documents a couple of years ago, highlighting what had never been known before, publicly anyway, was the extent of the JFK administration's intransigence against allowing the Israelis to develop nuclear energy in Dimona. He was adamant that thing was being able to be shut down because they were doing it in secret, and he suspected correctly, as it turns out in the 1980s, thanks to the leaks by that Vanunu Israeli guy who's still in prison, that they were using it to develop nukes. So foreign affairs, one wonders if Israel is mentioned in the documents, and that's partly why national security reasons or foreign affairs reasons we cannot release these documents. So COVID is just the catch-all now, but before, it's been postponed twice before.
Yeah.
Release these documents.
Vanunu's were released, by the way. Vanunu's not in prison anymore. Hello.
Trump actually delayed it twice. Trump's move in 2018 came on the deadline he himself had previously imposed in 2017 for the full release of the files.
Yeah, well, it's national security. That you can see how even Trump would if he looked at him, if he to whatever extent he saw the
right, if he saw Israel,
he saw Israel,
that goes against the social strategy,
right? Or even from a national security point of view, if you release the fact that the hard evidence that members of the CIA, basically the Washington establishment, political establishment, the career intelligence operatives and stuff, are the ones who actually killed JFK, then it might cast some aspersions, might cast some doubt on the wholesomeness of the CIA. One more little thing from the Ottawa Citizen, just as an example of
a COVID horror story.
Yeah,
I mean there are plenty, aren't there? So many.
There's so many, but I mean all sorts. When we didn't even get into vaccine adverse reactions, i.e., serious injury from vaccines, blood clots causing people to be basically rendered almost paralyzed and stuff. It's all out there for you to look for yourself. But this one, judge bans Ottawa mother from advising son against COVID-19 vaccine. The judge granted the father the rights as a sole decision maker when it came to being vaccinated,
because he had the right opinion.
Well, yeah, exactly. The mother has been legally banned from telling her, go to the first paragraph, the mother has been legally banned from telling her 14-year-old son not to get the COVID-19 vaccines, and prohibited by court order from showing him online information that calls into question the safety or efficacy of the vaccines. So a mother in Canada has been prevented by a judge from telling her son what pretty much every single scientific study on COVID, on this virus, in relation to children says, which is that children in his age group, 15 years and under, are basically immune from this virus. So she can't tell him that he's immune. His own immune system is more than capable. He will basically has more chance of getting struck by lightning and having any problem with this virus. She can't tell him that. She's banned legally from telling him that. And he has to get a vaccine. So if someone please tell me that this isn't just about getting people vaccines, but just getting as many people as possible vaccines in order that pharmaceutical companies make as much money as possible. Please tell me that that's not the case. How can you tell me? Somebody please make an argument that that's not the case when you see stuff like this happening.
Yeah. Well, in complete lockstep this week, both the US and the Canadian governments announced massive new deals with Pfizer to secure enough vaccines to give every 5 to 11-year-old in Canada's case 2 mRNA Pfizer vaccines, 5 to 11, over the next year.
Yeah. I mean, they just better hope that there's not hell to pay for this, because, I mean, the chances are that there will be, but unfortunately it'll all come out after the fact when it's too late to do anything about it. But I think, the worst case scenario is that, this winter, I mean, I'm sure, I have no confidence that the truth will come out. Let's say that it will be allowed to be publicly revealed what's actually happening. But what you are going to see is an awful lot of spin, an increasing amount of dubious spin and implausible theories and implausible explanations as to why bad stuff is happening that don't make any sense.
Yeah.
In particular, in terms of people coming down with all sorts of, large numbers of people becoming sick and ill as a result of vaccines compromising our immune system.
Yeah, you see the media is already using euphemisms, medical emergencies and mystery illness and sudden death. Who knows? But
yeah,
a lot of them are probably vaccidents, as people are starting to call them.
Vaccidents.
Do you want to end on something funnier?
Absolutely. Give us some fun there.
So they wheeled out Joe Biden for another CNN town hall. CNN town hall. It's not a town hall if CNN's doing it with a select audience
of about 20 people.
But in conjunction with that, he gave a press conference for the first time since July. Can you imagine that? The President of the United States. Well, specifically, it's a press conference where he actually takes questions, which are probably agreed beforehand. Because as Jen Psaki said this week, of course, everyone who's allowed into our events are vetted beforehand. Anyway, they're so, they've got him wrapped in,
cotton
wool, from here to space. There's so much protecting him. Let's pull up this one. So, Joe Biden, people probably saw this go viral, right? He did this weird thing with his hands on a couple of occasions. On one occasion, to emphasize something, that there would be zero of something. What did he say? What percentage of income, the question was, do you believe is fair for the wealthy to pay? Oh, no, I think someone tweaked that or something. Anyway, it was something to do with taxes. And he's he made this symbol over his eyes, 0%.
That's the white power symbol.
Well, go up
That's
to
an
the
upside down P.
Well, Tim Young, right, is a commentator in the US. He's being facetious.
Yeah.
He's obviously flashing back to Trump days and going, oh, every time someone uses the OK sign, it's because they're a white supremacist. Oh, my God. But Reuters decided to fact check it. So look at the headline.
Really?
Go up there.
Fact check. Biden talked about corporations not paying a cent in town hall gesture movement. It was not the white power symbol. So it depends who does the white power symbol. So there's no question of whether or not that is the white power symbol. Of course it's the white power symbol. It just depends who's using it.
Yes.
That's the answer, right? I got you.
Neiman in the comments says, let's go, Brandon. That's
Let's
hilarious,
go, Brandon.
That's the beauty of a spontaneous meme, right?
Yep.
Let's go, Brandon.
Do we have the one where he's holding the two ski poles, where he's practicing for skiing? Practicing for no?
I don't have
we don't need that one anyway. People probably saw it. He's like, lay it on me, I'm ready. I'm ready to take your hard question. I might not be able to answer, but I'll give it a go.
I think he was trying to muster the mental will to be able to follow Anderson Cooper's question.
Saying, yeah.
I mean, Anderson Cooper's trying to be as soft as possible.
Right.
He's on your team,
Right.
And he still has to, oh God, where is it? I'm losing my train of thought. What?
Maybe he was constipated or something. Yeah.
It's such a state.
Anyway, that's the state of the world. It's a slow burn on the whole. Like we talked the past few shows about the economy. Is the economy stupid? And we've mentioned a little bit about inflation here. I mean, we don't need to go over that again. It's a slow burn on that kind of thing. in terms of, there's still a lot of container ships stuck offshore, particularly in California. It's all waiting to happen, basically, and it's, we still give it a high probability of happening, but probably not between now and Christmas, although there will be a build-up between now and then, and more likely in the new year, when they let that dog off the leash, basically, and things go fluey.
This is your crystal ball moment. Okay.
Yeah, after Christmas.
So the tyrants are going to let us have Christmas.
Well,
and then
as long as you get
slap us silly.
As long as you get the booster.
Right.
Make sure you get the booster, and then you'll have Christmas. And Fauci said there, I think it was maybe a week or two ago, Fauci said everybody can enjoy a nice Christmas this year as long as you're vaccinated. With his vaccine derived from his lab-created virus that he funded. The vaccine that the vaccine that is essentially a part of the virus that he made in a lab.
It's an updated version of what he made in a lab. It's
Yes.
Fauci's latest. Thank you, Santa Fauci.
Fauci on a couch.
Saint Fauci, they call him Santa Fauci.
Santa Fauci. Santa Fauci's going to allow us to have Christmas this year. As long as you get boosted and vaccinated.
And then you think it all goes to hell
after
thereafter.
Christmas. Yeah.
Because they can no longer...
Velocity of money, man. Look it up. It's all about the velocity of money, and everybody knows that over Christmas, money is super fast. A lot of spending over Christmas.
Right.
A lot of demand. But a supply that can't meet that demand. It's the comedy stupid.
Bring it on, because if the alternative is this interminable horror show, I'd rather...
You'd rather have the denouement sooner rather than later?
Yeah.
All right. We'll see. We'll see what we can do. Bring on the eschaton. So, yeah. Listen, we'll probably leave it there for this week. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for... What else did they do? Talk? Chat? They didn't have any good questions, though, did they? Need to get better questions.
Some good comments.
Good comments,
I saw
though.
a couple.
They don't have any questions because we answer all the good questions. And they don't have any good ones. It's not their fault. We just answer all the good questions already before they can ask them. Yeah, so anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, if you're listening. And thanks to our chatters. We really do appreciate you and for commenting. Smash all the buttons. We'll be back next week with another update on what the hell has been going on over the past week. So until then, have a good one.
Till next time.
Bye.
Can't stop the signal now.